I think probably one of the funniest things that I did um, when I was in Traverse City after I graduated from college was to pull the I Hug Big John trick at the Cherry Festival. We became very famous for that. I uh, I had the idea that since I was a big guy, I mean, I had a 52-inch chest and big arms, 21.5-inch arms, that I would go down to the Cherry Festival and just go around and give women hugs. And when I gave them a hug, I'd bounce my chest, and they'd be startled because things would be moving on the front of them, and everybody got a kick out of it. So I did so much of that the first couple of years. I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to get recognized for that. So I printed up some green I Hug Big John stickers. I printed up over 600 of those for this one cherry festival, and went around. We went to the beer tent. We were on the beach, anywhere we could go, and people knew who I was, and they always encouraged women to come up and give me a hug and get an I Hug Big John sticker. So I did that the whole week. Basically, I would startle some of the women that didn't know what was going on, and I actually had beer spilled down my back and everything. Everybody got a big kick out of it, especially at the beer tent. I actually had them lined up to hug Big John, and I'd give them a sticker. And then during the Cherry Festival, you would see these green I Hug Big John stickers all over the place, and women would wear it, and it was kind of like a badge of distinction, I guess. And after the week was over, handing out those 600, my chest was so sore from bouncing my pectorals that I really had to take a rest from working out. So it was kind of funny. It was a good thing to do, and I got approached by the executive director of the Cherry Festival, who knew who I was and saw me doing this, and he basically said, "Hey, Saturday is the Cherry Royale Parade, and we'll print up a whole bunch of those I Hug Big John stickers. We'll throw you on the float, and you could walk the parade route and give out I Hug Big John stickers." And I looked at him, I goes, "I don't think so. Are you crazy? I can't do that anymore." So that was a big spoof that we did, and it was really funny, and people really enjoyed it, and people remembered that. So that's my I Hug Big John story. Oh my gosh, there's another funny story at the Cherry Festival of some of the things that we used to do. I had this friend, Monty Odell. Monty used to come up for the Cherry Festival every year, and he participated in a lot of the scams that I pulled off during the Cherry Festival. And we were both single at the time, and we thought, there's a lot of beautiful women here in Traverse City, but we never have a chance to meet them. So I was thinking, I goes, "Hey, I think I got an idea." So what I did is I went to TV 29 and 8, and I told them what I was planning on doing, and that I needed a video camera with TV 29 and 8 and some clothing that said TV 29 and 8 News. They said okay, because I was in the Playhouse and I knew a lot of these people, and they said, "Well, as long as you're not going to record anything, we can loan you that." So what we did is, Monty and I concocted this scheme that Monty would be the cameraman, running the camera, which had no film in it, wearing his TV 29 and 8 hat and WABC TV t-shirt, and I would be dressed in my TV 29 and 8 polo shirt with a microphone, and we'd go down to the Cherry Festival, and we would do an interview to find out the most beautiful person or most beautiful woman in the Cherry Festival. It was a great scam. What we did is we set up down to the Cherry Festival, and then we set the camera up, and then we started talking to people and say, "Hey, we're going to be doing this. We're from KLIX, Los Angeles, and we're brought here to interview the most beautiful woman at the Cherry Festival." And pretty soon we had a line of people that were lined up in front of this camera that had no film. Monty was taking the pictures, and I was doing the interview with these beautiful women at the Cherry Festival. And we'd always ask them where they're from, and what their phone number was, and then we'd interview them about the Cherry Festival experience, and it was just totally hilarious. We probably had 50 women in line that we were interviewing, and we were locking down phone numbers, and we were making arrangements to meet some other time, and it was really funny. These women were so gullible, and that we did all these interviews, and Monty was in tears because he was trying to video this thing, and some of the stuff that I was pulling was just outrageous, and it was really funny. We did the interviews and everything. Of course, KLIX Los Angeles never existed. Women were gullible, and we did all the interviews, and we got to meet some new people. So just another scam that we pulled at the Cherry Festival. Boy, we had so much fun at Cherry Festivals through the years. One of the things that I'm proud to have invented, basically, I guess some people think I'm kind of weird for doing it, but we used to, back in the day, even not during the Cherry Festival, but particularly during the Cherry Festival, we would take our boats and back it up to the beach, and then we'd anchor there so that the back of the boat was facing the beach, and we were all together, and we'd have lots of fun. There was everybody that I knew down there. And one day I was sitting on the back of the boat, and I noticed that there's a lot of homeless people in Traverse City, and one in particular was called Cowboy. He wore a cowboy hat, and he was always walking around town picking up cans so he could get some money to buy whatever he needed to buy. And I saw him walking down the beach, and he was trying to pick up cans. He was even taking people's cans, throwing them in a bag. And I thought, geez, would it be funny if I took a can and tied it to a fishing pole, threw it up on the beach, put it in a rod holder on my boat, and see if I could catch me a derelict. So I told my buddies about this, and they just thought it was crazy. And the beach was just packed during this Cherry Festival, and they saw what I was doing, and there was quite a few people that were paying attention to what was going on. So old Cowboy, he comes walking down the beach, and he's picking up cans, and he comes to my can, and he reaches down to pick it up, and I grabbed the pole, and I yanked it about 6 inches. And Cowboy was half drunk all the time anyway, and he kind of looked up and startled, like the can jumped away, and the beach just roared, and my buddies and the boats roared, and he tried again. And I moved it a little bit more, and he couldn't figure it out because he couldn't see the fishing line on the can. So we let Cowboy have that can, and the very next day, all my buddies were on the beach, and they had their fishing poles out, and they all had their cans on the end of the fishing line waiting for the derelicts to come by. And there was quite a few homeless people picking up cans. And so we called it Trolling for Derelicts, and it turned out to be an annual affair that we had at the Cherry Festival, where we would throw cans out and try to catch, catch people that were trying to pick up the cans. I know that sometimes we'd be yelling back and forth, hey, what's hitting today? Well, Coors Light. Oh no, Stroh's is hitting today. So we'd change our baits and throw it out there, and it was just hilarious. The people on the beach loved it. Sometimes we'd even take a 6-pack. I remember one time I took a 6-pack of empties in a plastic case that the cans go into, and threw it out on the beach, and lo and behold, somebody came up with a bag, picked up the 6-pack and threw it in the bag, and it was my opportunity to set the hook. And I yanked that can, and the bag shot up in the air, and the guy almost fell over from being startled that the cans jumped inside his bag, and it was just hilarious. We did this for a lot of years, and several years ago, I went down to the Cherry Festival, and I noticed that there were still doing the Trolling for Derelicts, some of my old buddies. So that's the story of the Cherry Festival. I think one of the funniest things that I did that really affected the whole community was the State Citizens for Albert Morton campaign that WCCW Radio concocted this scheme to have me represent Albert Morton, who is running for President of the United States The campaign was 1983, the election was 1984, so in the fall of 1983, WCCW contacted me and asked me if I would do this in terms of recording campaign messages and things like that for Albert Morton. So I said, sure, I would do that. And we did about, I think we did about 10 recordings, basically campaign promises and things that, Albert Morton was going to do for the world, to change the world. And everyone was outrageous. I can't remember all of them, but I do remember some of them. I know one of the ones was the campaign that I was campaigning for was to replace the drawbridge in Charlevoix with a underwater tunnel. A secondary one was to eliminate the car ferry going from Wisconsin to Michigan and build an underwater tunnel for that. So these were just outrageous schemes that we put together. And I recorded every one, and WCCW would take these campaigns and put them on the radio at certain times during the day. And people started to take notice of this Albert Morton, who was making these outrageous campaign promises to do things that made no sense. They were just astounded that somebody that was running for president of the United States would come up with these ideas. So at the time, I was working for United Technologies here in Traverse City. I recorded all my 10 recordings, and every day at lunch, the plant people and the salaried people would sit around and eat lunch, and they'd listen to Albert Morton and his campaign promises. And nobody knew that Albert Morton was me. And even my mother every day would tune in to WCCW to listen to see what Albert Morton had to say. It was really funny. I'd go into the lunchroom and people would just have the radios blasted talking about Albert Morton and what Albert was going to do now and the things that, the crazy things that if he was elected president, he was going to push across. And so this went on for about 2 months or more. And a following started to find out about Albert Morton. There was a TV personality called Scott Michael Traeger who was on TV who listened to the Albert Morton advertisements for president every day. He'd comment on his TV show about what Albert Morton said today. And it was pretty funny because I'd watch it, and I'd laugh. Anyway, there was a campaign started from his TV fans, basically to get Albert Morton on Scott Michael Traeger's show. And so I was contacted by WCCW, and I really wanted to be anonymous. I didn't want people to know that I did this. So CCW asked me, well, Scott Michael Traeger is really bugging us. He really wants to interview Albert Morton on his TV show. And I said, well, and the guy that was the radio host that was doing this is Dave Elliott. And Dave said, well, would you do that? Would you go on TV and pretend that you were Albert Morton? And I said, no, I don't think so. I really don't want people to know that I'm doing this. And so Dave thought about it for a while, and he came back. He goes, hey, I got an idea. He said, let's do one more Albert Morton video or tape. And at the end of it, I'm going to ask you if you're for real, and you can answer however you want to do that. I said, okay. So the previous 10 were all scripted. I had to read them. But this particular one, I went into CCW, and we sat down, and he just started the interview. He goes, well, Albert, I see that you've made a lot of campaign promises, and people are starting to ask about you, and they want to see you. And what is your latest campaign promise? And this was completely off the cuff, by the way, while I'm doing this on the radio. And I said, well, Dave, I thought about this. And one of the things that I'd like to do is I'd like to open a paraplegic skydiving school in Texas. And Dave looked at me, and he just busted up laughing. He was crying. And I started talking about how paraplegic people really needed to learn skydiving. They could pull the ripcord with their teeth and all this outrageous stuff. And I was being very serious. I never laughed at all. And I looked at Dave, and he was in tears. I mean, he didn't know what to say because we were doing this taping and it was live, and he just let me go. So I was making things up as I go. So it was really funny. And then at the very end of the tape, when I said, "Yeah, I'm going to do the skydiving school in Texas and paraplegics," and Dave asked me, he goes, "Well, Albert," he says, "a lot of people are wondering about you, whether you're for real or not. Albert Morton, are you for real?" And I said, "Well, Dave, I've got this group behind me, State Citizens for Albert Morton. They were pushing for me and getting me elected to president, but State Citizen for Albert Morton has the first letter of every one of those words is S, state, C, citizens, A, Albert, and M. So SCAM. Dave, what does SCAM spell? It spells a scam. No, I'm not for real, Dave." And then we ended the interview, and it was hilarious. Like I said, even my mother was listening every day. She had no idea that was me on the radio. And it was one of the biggest spoofs that we pulled in Traverse City, and CCW just loved it. So that was one of the things that I did that was really funny back in the 80s. Boy, there was a really cool thing that we did with my friend Pat McCarron, who him and I used to work together at United Technologies, and we kind of pal around together, and he was kind of a goofy guy, and of course I had no boundaries. I could act up at any time, given time. So back in those days in the 80s, I was the same height I was, 6'4", 6'5", but I weighed about 250, and I had 21-inch arms, and I had a huge chest, and I was a really big guy. Big enough that when I walked in the bar, everybody would take notice. Sometimes everything would stop, and they'd watch me walk in. So we were going to the loading dock in Traverse City one night to the bar. It was like a Friday night. There was a band there, and we concocted a little scheme. Because I was such a big guy, we thought that, I could pose as a professional wrestler. Beautiful Beauregard, that was my name. We made it up on the spot. And that we could see how many people would come and sit at our table, maybe buy us drinks. So it was kind of funny. So Pat, he's a pretty free guy, didn't really care what people thought. He went up to the band while they're on a break, and he said, "Hey, we have a celebrity in the audience. He's from the World Wrestling Association, and it's Beautiful Beauregard." And the band just ate it up. She goes, and the band said, "Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to bring Beautiful Beauregard up on the stage and let everybody know that there's somebody from the WWF or whatever it is in the audience." So lo and behold, the band, before they get the next set, and here I am in a t-shirt. I got 21.5-inch arms, a 52-inch chest, looking like a monster, looking like a professional wrestler. Bring me up on the stage, and the band says, "Hey, attention, everybody. We have a celebrity in the audience. From the World Wrestling Association or Federation, we have Beautiful Beauregard, a professional wrestler." And people were clapping and cheering. Of course, they were half in the tank anyway. But the funny thing about that is people came up and said, "I remember you from TV. I've seen you on TV. I've seen you wrestle. I really didn't know your name, but I've seen you before." And I thought, wow, these people are really out of it, So it was really funny. We played that. We sat down at the table, and immediately it was filled with people, mostly women, that wanted autographs from Beautiful Beauregard. So Beautiful Beauregard gave autographs, and the funny thing is I told them that I was going to be in Cadillac the next night, and that it's an event that requires tickets, and we had some tickets to a topless club in Cadillac called Stop 8, I think it was, or something like that, that somebody gave us, and I thought, wow, I'll just give them the tickets. I'll sign Beautiful Beauregard on it. And these women were gobbling this stuff up. They were getting the tickets, and they were planning to go into Cadillac the next night to see Beautiful Beauregard, which of course Beautiful Beauregard would never go there.
And secondarily, it's a topless club, and it's mostly women dancing, basically. So we got a real tee-hee out of that later. But anyway, we got all that in, and people were asking me to sign autographs. But the thing that really stuck with me was, how could people remember me from TV when I never wrestled, and I never was on the major channels for anything. So about 20 years went by, and I often wondered about that. And I was at the Park Place with Sharon, my wife, and Johnny and Jordan, and they were swimming. And I took off my shirt, and I was swimming in the pool in my bathing suit. And I had noticed that when I was playing with the kids, there was a bunch of little kids, say 12, 13, that were gathering in the corner and pointing at me. And I thought, what the heck? Why are they doing that? And they kept doing that and smiling and waving and everything. And finally, one of them came up to me and said, "Hey, aren't you that professional wrestler on TV?" And I looked at him and I says, "No, no, I'm not a professional wrestler." They said, "You look exactly like that professional wrestler." And, I didn't think anything more of it. And several years went by, and I happened to see a little piece on the World Wrestling Federation. And there's a guy on there named McMahon. I forget his first name. Anyway, he was doing an interview on TV. And I just happened to notice him, and I looked at him, and my hair stood on end. This is a big guy, my size. He looked exactly like me. So I was totally astounded. The joke was really on me, back to beautiful Beauregard, because these people back in the bar, the loading dock on that day, recognized me from TV from this McMahon guy who founded the World Wrestling Federation and actually was a professional wrestler. And you put his picture side by side with me, and he was almost identical in some of the photographs. So the joke that I played on the people many years before actually come back and played on me when I realized that the kids at the pool recognized me from TV because of this McMahon character, and the people at the bar recognized me on TV because of that same wrestler. So it was pretty funny. It was a moment that I just stood there for a second, and it sunk in when I saw his picture, and then everything kind of clicked, and it was like, wow.
This next story has to do with the 1969 NCAA Track Championships in Knoxville, Tennessee. I went down there to compete in the javelin, and I knew a lot of javelin throwers that also qualified, and we kind of hung out together, and we had an off day before we threw. So we decided that we'd walk around Knoxville, Tennessee, and see the sights, because we didn't have a car or anything. So we got together and we ate breakfast, and then we took a walk. We went across through downtown and then out farther towards the west, and there was a bridge going over the Tennessee River. The Tennessee River is a pretty large river, and we walked across that bridge. It had a walkway on it, and the cars went across it. And we just kept on walking, and we started turning back to the east and heading east and up a hill. And when we got to about, I'd say halfway back across the river from the track, we kind of said, you know what, we're kind of tired of this. I think we ought to go back, because we've been out for a couple hours. And we had noticed that there was a railroad bridge going across the Tennessee River. The railroad bridge basically was a big bridge. It was probably 100 feet above the water. And as you can see in this photo right here, that's how high it was, and the photo above it gives you a picture of how long it was. And the photo on this side over here basically shows us what we were facing when we were going to cross the river on this railroad bridge. So we kind of debated on it. There was a big sign up there that says pedestrians keep off, danger, etc., etc. But we had like 5 javelin throwers, and we were pretty smart guys. And so one of us put their ear on the railroad track like they do in the movies to listen to see if any trains were coming, to make sure it was safe to cross. So we put our ear on the railroad tracks, and I didn't hear anything. So we slowly started working our way across. And if you know railroad tracks that go across rivers, basically it's the railroad ties with a space in the middle that goes down directly to the river. In this particular bridge, that's exactly how it was. So there was no sides to it. It had the edges on it. And the ties were spaced about that far apart. So you could step on a tie, and then it was open space, step on a tie. So if you slipped, you'd fall and break your leg. If you fell off the bridge, you'd die. So we decided, well, what the heck? No train coming. You know, it'll be a good shortcut. We'll get back. We can eat lunch. So we started across the bridge, all 5 of us, really slow. One slow step at a time over the ties, and we got over the river, and we're going really slow and looking down. It was really scary, because if a train come, there was no place to go. There's no place to hang on, no place to step off the tracks. A train would run you over. So we got about into the middle of the span, as you can see in this photo to my right here, and we heard a train whistle. And my hair stood on end, and so did everybody else. Prior to this, we were moving about a step every 10 seconds. And when we heard that train whistle, we looked back and we saw the train. And we just took off a running, jumping 3 or 4 of those ties at a time because there was no place to go. I really thought we were all going to die. We took off a running, and fortunately, none of us stepped off into a hole in the tracks to break our leg or fell off the bridge, and we actually got to the other side, and we just kept on running because we knew we were in trouble. Well, the train saw us, and believe it or not, the train put on the brakes and stopped because they knew that we were over the river, and they would have took us right out and knocked us in the river, which was 100 feet below, which would have been, we'd have been dead. So anyway, that was a pretty scary adventure. I thought my life was over at that point in time. I'm glad we survived it, and I'm glad we didn't get in trouble, but that was a shenanigan that we pulled that really didn't turn out so good for us guys.